Hey everyone, my name is Wedge, and welcome back to another edition of Knowledge Pool. We've seen some pretty exciting decks pop up over the past few weeks. One of the strategies that has showed up time and again is Esper Control. This deck uses powerful kill spells, huge planeswalkers, and amazing draw spells to take games over and crush opponents. Let's get right into it. The land base is full of duels. 4 Godless Shrine, 4 Hallowed Fountain, and 4 Watery Grave help solidify the 3-color mana base. A full playset of both Temple of Deceit and Temple of Silence gives some much needed reach with their innate scry ability in addition to their convenience as colored mana sources. Rounding out the 27-card land base are 4 islands and 3 plains. It's important to note that this deck runs more land than any deck we've looked at in New Standard. Control decks love land. There are a variety of Esper Control decks that run anywhere from 0 creatures to 4 or 5. The deck we're looking at today sits right in the middle with 3. 1 Aetherling alongside 2 Blood Baron and Vizkopa are the only creatures in the deck. Once he hits the battlefield, Aetherling is a monster against other control strategies, or anything really. He is very difficult to get rid of and dodges a ton of removal. Great for the mirror or basically any deck running black, the Blood Baron is just a high quality card. Pro white and black is super relevant right now, helping it to dodge things like Detention Sphere, Chain to the Rocks, and Hero's Downfall. This particular strategy runs 5 walkers. 4 of them are Jace, Architect of Thought. Reasonably costed at 4 mana, this Jace is a card advantage machine with his -2 ability. This is great for a longer game where you're not necessarily trying to win or lose the game by turn 5. With the way the meta is right now, mainly aggro-centric, his first ability is also relevant. Taking away 2 or 3 power each turn can make a big difference when you're trying to stall out for that supreme verdict. The other planeswalker is a singleton Elspeth Sun's Champion. Dropping this down late game against another control deck or even some mid-range decks guarantees them a problem. Elspeth impacts the board immediately and always poses a threat to mid-range strategies with her middle ability. Her -7 is very strong, but by the time you get there, you have so many attackers it may just be overkill. The rest of the deck, in true control fashion, is made up of 25 removal, card advantage, and counterspells. We start with a playset of Detention Sphere. This card is a no-brainer in a format where Dom Rerate is running rampant. Green-red aggro seems to depend on this guy more and more for card advantage, and if you can't get rid of it, chances are the game won't last very long, and that's never a good thing for a control player. In addition, it grabs anything you don't like. It's just a really fair-costed removal spell. Speaking of removal, we see 2 Heroes Downfall. We've seen this card in every deck running black, and there's no secret as to why. The card is great. Instant speed Dreadbore in 1 color is extremely powerful, even if it's for 1 more mana. It's well worth it. This hits your Domries, Xenagos, Ashiok, Elspeth, or anything else you may find bothersome. At instant speed. This card is great. It is. Moving on, we have Esper staples in 4 Azorius Charm, 4 Sphinx's Revelation, and 4 Supreme Verdict. If you see a deck that has blue and white in it, these cards are normally bound to follow. Azorius Charm is amazingly versatile, so it fits in the main deck game 1 against pretty much anything. Sphinx's Revelation is the big Azorius man on campus and everyone knows it. The card is just stupid. X life and X cards? Come on, next. Supreme Verdict is a must in this deck and is a reason on its own to run these colors. The metagame is so creature-centric right now considering Devotion is a big strategy. This is the best time to be playing board sweepers. Your Supreme Verdicts and Mizzium Mortars have never been stronger. A must-play in any control deck. It literally is the only way you're going to survive to mid-game against most strategies. The only counters main deck are 3 Dissolve. Where there's a blue control deck, there's a counter. Last block had Dissipate, this one has Dissolve. It counters spells, stays in against mid-range and control matchups. Probably comes out against aggro matchups. Pretty straightforward. Next we have 2 Divination. Card draw spells are always wanted in these types of strategies. Divination isn't the best draw spell in the world, but you work with what you have. Also, considering there is so much scry in the deck, chances are your divinations will draw into higher quality cards if you've already moved the bad ones to the bottom. The last spell in the deck is Thoughtseize. A pair of these make the main deck because it's just so disruptive. The card gets rid of anything in the opponent's hand. You can probably think of any deck right now and imagine a card you would want to Thoughtseize at any point in the game. It's extremely versatile, and worst case scenario, you see your opponent has a crap hand and you know you have free reign over the game. The sideboard is pretty interesting. We start with one Pithing Needle. Great against Planeswalkers, the Gods activated abilities, and most importantly, Pack Rat. I'm kidding. No, but seriously though, Pack Rat. Next, we have an additional 2 Blood Baron of Vizkopa. I can see a ton of stuff coming out against an aggro-heavy deck, especially one that runs black or white. Blood Baron probably comes in against the junk mid-range strategies, any deck that runs black removal, and probably any pure aggro deck like mono red or green red aggro. If you can land the Baron, his lifelink will save you. One Dark Betrayal is just in response to the meta right now. This thing hits the black devotion deck extremely hard, stopping Pack Rat or Desecration Demon from getting out of control. In addition, we have 2 Doomblade. Coming in against anything creature heavy that doesn't run black, this removal spell is great against mono blue, mono red, red green, blue white, and basically any other kind of devotion deck you can think of. The last kill spell in the sideboard is a single ultimate price. There are a few multicolored creatures being used right now, but ultimate price hits most devotion targets. It's great to stem the bleeding against mono red devotion or slow down mono blue devotion from getting a billion elementals off Master of Waves. One of the most surprising cards in the sideboard is Gainsay. This deck sides a full playset of them. I'm sure this is because mono blue devotion is prevalent right now, but committing this much to it on sideboard is definitely a risk depending on your local player base. If you know people around you that are going to be playing a lot of blue, don't be afraid to slam a set of these in your sideboard. What does a mono blue devotion deck do against a playset of Gainsay? Nothing. Nothing would be the answer. Next, we have 2 Negate. This card is pretty self-explanatory. It's amazing against other control decks, as most of them don't run any creatures at all. It can also be game-breaking against mid-range strategies running black for kill spells. Negate can fill a lot of roles, and unless you're against a pure aggro matchup, there is good reason to side this in. The last card in the deck is Jace Memory Adept. 2 of these definitely come in against the mirror or any control matchup for that matter. This card is terrible against aggro and mid-range, so you know this is targeted somewhere. Mill is great now that Innistrad Block is gone and Snapcaster no longer haunts graveyards forever. Jace ends the game really fast. It's that simple. What you need to know about this deck is that it is really slow and has very few win conditions. Esper Control players know this and will stall the game out as long as possible looking for just one of their answers. In this deck in particular, we're talking about 4 cards in total that really end the game. The Aetherling, Blood Barons, and Elspeth are the real game winners. Without these cards, Esper Control just sits back and pokes you annoyingly. This is something to keep in mind when playing against it. Anything that kills Planeswalkers is super strong against this type of deck. It's going to rely on Jace and Elspeth for card and board advantage. If you can use even something like Glare of Heresy to take out Elspeth, that deals a huge blow to their chances of winning the game. As far as strategies that have innate advantages and disadvantages against this deck, there's a general pattern to look at. Aggro decks are generally supposed to be control decks. What ends up happening is the aggro deck beats down as fast as possible until the game is over or Supreme Verdict hits the table. If Supreme Verdict hits, the control player wins. If it doesn't, aggro player wins. However, Esper Control is pretty vulnerable considering its lack of real win cons. If I was an aggressive player, I would side some control cards and removal just for a matchup like this. Looking at most Esper decks, you see that they only run a handful of both creatures and walkers. Take advantage of this. Run a little removal. They won't see it coming. Mid-range strategies are usually worse off than aggro because they're slower, and that's exactly what control wants. Supreme Verdict is just as good against a mid-range deck turn 6 as it is against an aggro deck turn 4. To mitigate these losses, remember that Golgari Charm is a thing. Regeneration is a powerful effect and shouldn't be forgotten about in a meta like this one. If you're red, don't underestimate your Mizzium Mortars in this matchup, as they do kill the Blood Baron and Elspeth tokens, both of which are primary win conditions. As far as control decks go, draw more cards? It's a control mirror. First to stick Aetherling and untap wins. Done. Esper Control is the epitome of what a control strategy is. It sits and waits for you to run out of things to do and then strikes hard. The combination of strong draw spells, planeswalkers, and removal make this deck a top tier strategy. Make sure your sideboard is ready for it. As always, subscribe below for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Mana Source, I'm Wedge, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.